Well, everyone, it looks like this thing is going to be functioning at the moment, which is fantastic. We are once again going to be chatting about our book this month here on the second Tuesday from 7 to 7:30 p.m. Want to thank Miss Mandy for handling our chat last month on Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library, and hope all of you had a chance to read that book. This book that we're going to be reading this month for April is Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. And I was really excited about this book. When I first started hearing about it, it was that idea that normal men and normal women were turning into epics, superheroes. And instead of it being the case that these people become superheroes with their superpowers, they actually use their superpowers to enslave and use everyone else and be cruel. And I thought that was a really interesting concept, something that we weren't seeing in some literature. DC does have something with Injustice where some of the heroes that we know become bad, and there's been many times where we have superheroes that we know that in an alternate universe they're actually evil. But I thought it was interesting that in this book there are no superheroes that are good. All epics, all of them that have superpowers are evil. And I thought that was a really interesting topic. So I'm going to jump over to YouTube real fast and make sure that we have our live chat going. It looks like we does. I'm just going to put something on there. Good evening. How is everybody doing? So if you guys didn't know, we're actually moving to a slightly different way of doing our live chats. We've been doing it where we've been streaming live on YouTube using Wirecast, and we've been looking on Edmodo for anyone that actually wanted to be chatting back with us. We were noticing that it was really hard for people to actually get onto Edmodo at the same time, and so what we're going to be doing now is just using that live chat feature in YouTube. So if you are getting to that YouTube channel right now, the YouTube video, you should have a live chat basically like widget to the right on your desktop, or if you're using your mobile device, the live chat should be an option down at the bottom, and that is where we're actually going to be chatting tonight. So right now it should say something like good evening, how is everybody doing, and if you want to be chatting with us, feel free to do that. Now, something else that I found out about Wirecast is we can actually do a screen capture. I don't have the ability right now to be narrating while we're doing the screen capture, unfortunately, but I can play a YouTube video, and it does get the audio from the YouTube video. So I thought that we would start really quickly with a 30-second book trailer for Steelheart, because I thought it was kind of fun. It was created by Scholastic, who are the people that put out Steelheart ultimately. So I'm going to switch to that. It'll be quiet until the video gets going, and then you'll be able to hear the video itself. So give us 1 second here as we do that, and here we go.
We're on the scene of what appears to be another epic massacre.
The day my father died was the day I learned to fear. But fear does not define us. Our courage to fight back does. I've seen Steelheart bleed, and I will see him bleed again.
So that was the book trailer for Steelheart, and as you noticed, it was actually from Random House Books, not from... Oh, oops, wait a minute. I told it to stop playing. There we go. I apologize about that. Ultimately, Steelheart was put out by Random House Books, not by Scholastic, as I mentioned before, so I do apologize about that. And so that was the book trailer for Steelheart. As you can tell, there are some superpowers that Steelheart has, and if you read the introduction to the book, there were a couple of moments that I thought were really important that kind of set up the rest of the story. And one of those moments, when David, the character that we're following through Steelheart, is talking to his dad, trying to prevent his dad from helping, trying to prevent his dad from trying to stop Death Point at that point in the story. And David says, please, I managed to whisper, the heroes, you said they'll come. Let them stop him. And his dad says, "Sometimes, son," my father said, prying my fingers free, "you have to help the heroes along." And that was something that I thought was interesting. And as we get into the idea of the Reckoners, those normal humans that are trying to take down the epics, that was something I thought was really important. I also thought it was interesting at the beginning there that we have David's father thinking that there will be heroes that will rise up, and that these heroes are going to actually be helping us, that some of these epics are going to wind up being good. And ultimately, so we have a conversation with David's dad and the mortgage man at the beginning of the prologue. And it says, "Dangerous?" my father asked. "Well, the epics." "But they aren't dangerous," my father said passionately. "The epics are here to help." Not this again, I thought. The mortgage man's smile finally broke, as if he was taken aback by my father's tone. "Don't you see?" my father said, leaning forward. "This isn't a dangerous time. It's a wonderful time." The mortgage man cocked his head. "Didn't your previous home get destroyed by an epic?" "Where there are villains, there will be heroes," my father said. "Just wait. They will come." I thought that was really interesting as well, because we have that idea that David's father thinks that there's going to be heroes that will rise, and he thinks that those are going to be epics that are superheroes that will fight against other epics. As we see in the prologue, that's actually not what happens. When there's an epic, we see that all epics are evil in the beginning of the story there. And that is ultimately, the book actually says in the prologue that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we see when these people get these godlike powers from the calamity, that instead of turning good to helping and focusing on everyone else, they become very selfish and focused on themselves. And that was something that I found really interesting as we were looking at Death Point at the beginning of the story there. I thought that he did a really interesting job of portraying what might be going through other epics' minds. So I wanted to read you just a little bit of the beginning there. And let me see here. Da-da-da-da-da. I also found it interesting that David can tell the difference between an epic and normal people by the way that they walk. And it says that in the beginning of the prologue here. "So I was actually watching when the epic strolled into the bank. I noticed him immediately, though nobody else seemed to pay him much heed. Most people say you can't tell an epic from an ordinary man unless he starts using his powers, but they're wrong. Epics carry themselves differently. That sense of confidence, that subtle self-satisfaction. I've always been able to spot them." Which will probably come in handy later on in our story here. Now, there was some parts as it's kind of going through here where Death Point is monologuing, going through and explaining to all the people that he's actually killing and massacring why he's doing this. It starts off right here, and I'm kind of going to bounce through because we don't have a lot of time, obviously. I'm going to bounce through to just where he's talking, kind of talking about his motivation. Why is he doing this? Death Point, this is what happens. He began to stroll through the room. "A thought occurred to me this morning," he said. The room was large enough that his voice echoed. "I was showering, and it struck me. It asked, 'Death Point, why are you going to rob a bank today?'" We skip down a little bit lower. "I've been planning this for weeks, you see," the epic said. "But the thought only struck me this morning. Why? Why rob the bank? I can take anything I want anyway. It's ridiculous." He continues to go on. He continues to kill people. "Money is worthless to me, you see. Completely worthless." He continues to kill people throughout the bank. We see that David's dad is starting to fight back, trying to formulate a plan of how he can actually stop Death Point. But the epic continues his rant. He continues to his monologue here. And let's see here. Where is it? It's a little bit lower. Here we go. Death Point hopped over the counter and landed on the other side. "And so it doesn't matter," he said, still speaking in a conversational tone, strolling around the room. "Robbing a bank would give me money, but I don't need to buy things. A conundrum. Fortunately, while showering, I realized something else. Killing people every time you want something can be extremely inconvenient. What I wanted to do was frighten everyone, show them my power. That way, in the future, nobody would deny me the things I wanted to take. Yes, robbing a bank for the money would be pointless, but showing what I can do, that is still important. So I continued with my plan. I found it really interesting. I thought that Death Point kind of got to the heart of that matter. That these superheroes that actually aren't superheroes, these super-powered beings, these epics, instead of using their power for positive motivation, they're using their power for that selfish motivation. And Death Point did a really good job of pointing all those things out. He could use and get anything that he wanted. He had absolute power. So instead of just going around robbing banks, he decided that he would just show everyone his power, and then they would just give him anything that he wanted. And ultimately, that is what Steelheart does. Steelheart walks into the room and actually stops Death Point and says, Death Point, and actually we can read that part as well, because I found that very interesting. And let's see. Where was that? It was just a little bit earlier in the book here. And still having a hard time finding it, of course. I couldn't believe Steelheart's words. And this is what Steelheart said. You seem to have strength, little epic, Steelheart said, glancing at the bones scattered around the room. I will accept your subservience. Give me your loyalty or die. And this was right after Death Point, who had been able to kill people just by pointing at them, tried to point at Steelheart, and instead of him vaporizing, instead of him dying, it just put a little cigarette burn on his outfit. So ultimately, Steelheart is more powerful than Death Point. So Steelheart says, I own this town. This is what he says, actually. I have claimed this city, little epic. It is mine. He paused. And it is my right to dominate the people here, not yours. So you see this idea of might making right, of these epics being powerful enough and no one is able to stop them. Even though an entire battalion, even though this entire group of soldiers come in and just come in blazing, their bullets just bounce off of Steelheart, who is easily able to take them down with energy that emits from his hands. We see a little bit later that David's father, just before he's killed, actually shoots Steelheart. And as it is going, and it's actually trying to kill Death Point behind Steelheart, but it grazes Steelheart's cheek. And for some reason, that bullet winds up grazing him and actually drawing blood from Steelheart. Steelheart winds up killing everyone in the bank vault, everyone in the bank, except for David, who hides in the bank vault. So we have a very interesting prologue going on there. I'm really interested to see where the rest of the story is going to go. With that idea of heroes are going to rise, that idea that all epics with that absolute power are absolutely evil, and they're lording their power over those around them. But the Reckoners and David, who winds up aligning with them, not joining them, but aligning for their same purposes, trying to take down Steelheart. Because at the end of the prologue, we hear this. My mind holds a clue to how Steelheart might be killed. Something about the bank, the situation, the gun, or my father himself was able to counteract Steelheart's invulnerability. Many of you probably know about that scar on Steelheart's cheek. Well, as far as I can determine, I'm the only living person who knows how he got it. I've seen Steelheart bleed, and I will see him bleed again. Now, right now, what I wanted to do is, that was a little bit about the book itself, a little bit about that prologue, kind of setting up what the rest of the story might bring us to. So I also wanted to give a little bit of information on Brandon Sanderson as well. So let me see if we have any chats in our live dashboard here, and it doesn't look like we do at the moment. Ultimately, if you're watching this video afterwards, you can be responding in the comments down below, because every one of our live chats is actually archived on YouTube, which is really convenient. And you can also catch the archive on our newfanglebookclub.wordpress.com page. So I wanted to give a little bit of information about Brandon Sanderson, who's the author of Steelheart. And this is actually from a frequently asked questions that I got from Brandon Sanderson's website. So I Googled Steelheart Brandon Sanderson and then found his website. And this is his frequently asked questions section on getting started writing. I didn't really like books much as a kid. It was a teacher, who was actually named Mrs. Reader, who handed me the very first fantasy novel I ever really finished reading. I was 14 and the book was called Dragon's Bane by Barbara Hamley. And it had this gorgeous Michael Whelan cover on it, which immediately caught my eye. I read the book and absolutely fell in love with it. I became an avid reader, mostly of fantasy novels. Over the next couple of years, soon as I began to think, somebody out there is making a living at this, and it seems like it's something that I would really enjoy doing. That's when I found some purpose and direction. And let's see here. He also says this about getting published. The journey from starting to write to actually getting published was long, frustrating, and difficult. I wrote 13 novels before I sold Elantris, which was my 6th. The big change for me happened when I managed to figure out how to revise. I always had good ideas and got better and better at storytelling, but it was the power of revision that finally got me published. It took about 8 years of dedicated writing and being rejected. The one who gave it to the editor who finally bought the book was an agent I had met and talked to at a convention. He thought I was a nice guy and didn't want to just reject the book without looking at it. This is what he says about where do you get your story ideas. The good old where do you get your ideas question. Inspiration comes from all over. Often things I see. Color magic in Warbreaker came from watching black and white movies. The mist in Mistborn came from driving through a foggy night at 70 miles per hour. Sazed came from a Buddhist monk I met in Korea. Serene came from a friend, Annie, who complained that she was too tall and too smart for men to want to date. And this is what he says about writer's block. When I have writer's block, it's almost never, what do I write next? For me, writer's block happens when a novel or a chapter just isn't working the way I want it to. I deal with it by writing the next part anyway. I find that just writing it anyway, writing it poorly, and setting aside what I wrote and trying again fixes the problem almost every single time. So those are a couple of things that Brandon Sanderson says about his kind of process of how he writes. Now let's see here. These are some suggestions for other books that Brandon Sanderson thinks that other people should read. So this is what he says. Which book do you think every teenager should read? I think that the best thing a teen can do is read widely and search out what interests them specifically. I hesitate to say there is one novel that every teen should read, as I feel books are a lot like shoes. Not every pair of shoes is going to fit you, and not every book is going to be right for every person. This is the importance of having good teachers and librarians. A teen should search out the books that fit them, fall in love with the reading, and then see where that takes them. I've mentioned Dragon's Bane elsewhere. It's interesting because this is a book that should not have worked for me. Everyone likes to give teens books about teenagers, but this book is about a middle-aged woman. So it's not a book that normally would have been given to someone like I was. But I had a smart teacher who knew that I needed something more than what others had been giving me. I was bored of stories about people like me, and wanted one about someone unlike me. Now, these are some books that Brandon Sanderson said in September 25th of 2012. These are some books that he liked. Terry Pratchett, who is an author. Going Postal is my favorite Pratchett right now. If you read him, don't start with the first book. Start with the books in the middle of his career, like Guards. Not the beginning, because his books get better and better as it goes along. His later books are pure genius. Anything by Daniel Abraham under any of his various pen names. The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. Slight content warning. Dragon Prince by Melanie Ron is one of my favorite books of all time. Anne McCaffrey. If you haven't read her books, I don't know why you're reading mine. You need to go and read hers immediately. Guy Gavriel K. Tagana is a wonderful work. Slight content warning. Melanie Ron, I especially like her epic fantasy. I haven't read her urban fantasy, but Dragon Prince is one of my favorite books of all time. And of course, Pat Rothfuss, who is a genius. I love Name of the Wind. Barbara Hamley, Dragon's Bane was one of the books that got me into fantasy. Anything by Robin Hobb, but particularly the Fitz books. Brent Weeks, Black Prism in particular. To keep track of what the field is doing nowadays, I would recommend at least one book each from the following: Stephen Erickson, George R.R. Martin, and Jim Butcher. This past year, I read Uglies by Scott Westerfeld and enjoyed that. Another question he got asked was, what are some clean fantasy books that you would recommend? Garth Nix is wonderful. If you haven't read Sabriel, I suggest it. Mary Robinette Kowal writes Regency-style fantasy novels. I find them different, clever, and fun. Werner Vinge's A Fire Upon the Deep is one of my all-time favorite science fiction books. I can't remember if there are content issues. I'm in a reread right now, and it is delightful as I remember it being. But something might come up that I didn't remember being there from a read last decade. Tad Williams is wonderful, but very long-winded. I happen to like how long-winded he is, but I should warn that it is his style. Very little tends to happen at the start of one of his novels, as it's all set up. L.E. Modisette Jr. writes epic fantasy after the older style, more slow-paced, lots of description. I find his books to be quite good, but they're not for everyone. They do tend to be very clean, though. Same goes for Terry Brooks, who has a strong personal rule that he will never write or cover blurb something that is not clean. His books do feel a tad outdated these days, though. Other author pals of mine who write clean: young adult science fiction fantasy, Shannon Hale, James Dashner, and Jessica Day George, all very good writers. So those were just a couple of things that I wanted to mention to you guys. I found that in the frequently asked questions of Brandon Sanderson's website, there was a lot of information about his books and stories, films, games, and other, about writing, and a little bit more about Brandon Sanderson himself. And each one of those topics has several other topics, which sometimes brings you like a whole article on that topic. So if you want to know a little bit more about Brandon Sanderson's world, or how he comes up with his worlds, his frequently asked questions section would be a good place to start. He also has a blog that he sends information to, and you can find that information on the Brandon Sanderson website. And there's also a fan forum that is going to be information that goes very deep into the lore of Brandon Sanderson, which I think would be really cool if that's interesting to you. So my friends, we're actually getting rather close to the end of our chat here. Wanted to mention once again that we do this on second Tuesdays from 7 to 7:30 p.m. and we're going to start doing our live chats on YouTube. So we will have ourselves on YouTube watching the live chat to the right of your video. If you log yourself in with a Google account, which is who owns YouTube ultimately, and you will be able to comment on that YouTube video and in that live chat section, and we'll be able to respond to you guys. You can also, if you are watching this video after the live stream, you can actually just comment in those comments underneath the video, and we'll be looking at those and watching for those. So our next time that we're going to be online is going to be the second Tuesday of May, which is going to be May 9th from 7 to 7:30. Before that, we're going to have our face-to-face chat here at the library, at the Hayden Library. That's going to be on April 25th. That's going to be from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. The next book that we're going to be reading in May is going to be Never Say Die by Will Hobbs. So that's another one that we're interested in reading. So right now, I am going to be signing off. Thank you so much for watching that. I'll be adding a couple of those links and things into the comment section of the archive of the YouTube video, and we will catch you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching live, or if you're watching a little bit later, thank you so much for watching as well, and we will catch you guys later. Thanks.